5 former police officers from Memphis charged in connection with the death of Tyre Nichols pleaded not guilty in court today. Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, Emmett Martin, Desmond Mills, and Justin Smith were all fired from the force and charged with second-degree murder following Nichols' beating in January. So joining us now to discuss this is the president of the NAACP's Memphis branch, Van Turner Jr. Thank you so much for joining us. You were in the courthouse. You were in the room during the arraignment. Can you give us a sense of what that was like, the energy in the room? Did you get a chance to look at the officers in their faces?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite moving. There was such courage shown by the family. We know that this is a tough time for them. It's a tough time for the city, but they're here for justice. They wanted to stare those 5 officers in their faces so they could put a human face, could put a family, in place of Tyre, so they know what they've done. They've taken a son away. They've taken an upstanding individual away, a father away. And so the mother and father wanted to be in the courtroom, so those 5 officers knew what they had done in taking the life of Tyre Nichols. So they're courageous. They're going to stay to the end. They're going to fight for justice, and we're going to be here to support them.
When you heard that not guilty plea, was that what you expected to hear in that courtroom? What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we knew that was coming. They've hired attorneys. They're going to go through the process. As officers, they would have known the process already. So we know that murder 2 is the top charge. We have full faith and confidence in the district attorney. We know that he's going to put forth the best case they can be put forth. And obviously we're going to work to change policies, and we're going to work to ensure the legacy of Mr. Nichols. We want to make sure that his death was not in vain. And so we're going to continue to work and support this family and to make sure that justice is carried out.
All right, so we want to talk about that. When you said change policies, in this case, I think that many people will say that it was a change of pace to see the officers fired so quickly, a change of pace to see them facing second-degree murder charges. But there's still a long way to go. And Tyre's family would much prefer having him here instead of having this conversation. When you talk about the changes that need to happen in policing, I'm sure they're on many levels. Where do you start?
Well, I think we already have in place a can't wait, duty to intervene, duty to render aid, duty to escalate. We want to codify that, put that into a state act. And so we're working with the Tennessee legislature to make sure that happens. We also need a federal law, the George Floyd Act. We need to support that. The Senate needs to pick it back up. It needs to be voted into law. The president has said that he would sign it. And so those are 2 things that we can do to work towards policy changes to make sure that we are codifying action that we want to take place. We are making it a federal law so that it applies throughout the nation. And we want something here statewide to make sure that we have a state law that codifies duty to intervene, duty to render aid, duty to de-escalate. These things need to be statutory. They need to be state law. And that's what we're working towards. And I think that's the initial policy change that we would be looking for.
And jumping off from that, police accountability, how badly do we need this legislation to prevent the next tragedy from happening?
Obviously, we need it bad. Every day that we wait to pass legislation is a day that another individual may pass at the hands of law enforcement who have gone rogue. We need this law. The blood is on the hands of the legislators who are unwilling to act. Again, they send us their thoughts. They send us their prayers. We appreciate it, but we want action. We want direct action. We want immediate action. We want your thoughts. We want your prayers, but we want action. The George Floyd Police Reform Act needs to be passed. The Tyre Nichols Police Reform Act needs to be passed here in Tennessee. That's how you show us you mean what you say. We are listening to your words, but we're also looking at what you do. And so we have to have these pieces of legislation passed, and we need those pieces of legislation passed now.
Van, you can change legislation. Will that be enough to change culture, though? We saw it certainly seemed as if this particular unit had a problem with culture, with sort of act first, ask questions later.
I think the policy drives the culture. And once you have codified the policies in place, then you train on those policies, and then you hire leaders and senior officers who will promote that policy and make sure that the officers adhere to those policies. That's how you change culture. It's a top-down, bottom-up scenario. Everyone needs to know that they're serious about a duty to intervene, a duty to render aid, a duty to de-escalate. It's the law. And if you don't follow it, it needs to be immediate action, like what was done here, immediate terminations. And that's how you change culture. And hopefully this will change culture. The community demands that. We know that the trust has to be rebuilt, and you rebuild trust by showing us that you are going to push these policies and follow these policies and change the culture.
Van, I know you've been here before calling for change after a tragedy. Do you think there's the political will to actually get these changes passed?
I think so. And as we say, it took years and years for the Voting Rights Act to be passed. It took years and years for the Civil Rights Act to be passed. Oftentimes, these things that we do and undertake may not be immediate. They may not be as quick as we want, but we are fighting for our children. We're fighting for our grandchildren, and we're really fighting for the soul of this country. We go all across the world fighting for democracy, preaching that we have the best political system in place. And so if we're going to do that, we have to show that, and we have to make sure that we are executing on that here. So the change will be long, and it may be something that takes takes us a while, but I think we can get there. I think we can get there. We got to stick with it. We got to continue to fight. And although this may be something that takes a while, I think it's worth the fight, and I think eventually we'll win and we'll have the reform that we all desire and that we demand and that we want.
There's a number of investigations now going on, at the local level, at the federal level. I know that there's talk about looking into whether or not there's a pattern of behavior within the Memphis Police Department. Is there anything more that you would like to see done? Of course, legislation, but in terms of investigations, other questions that need to be asked.
It needs to be a top-down investigation. We've asked for the Department of Justice to come in and for a pattern and practice investigation. We want to make sure that we look at every angle and make sure that there's no stone unturned as we seek justice for Tyre. That's the only way that you make sure this doesn't happen again. We don't want just a surface investigation and we go back to business as usual. What we have seen is that business as usual doesn't work, and it leads to death, and it leads to further deterioration of the public trust between law enforcement and officers. Nothing was done after George Floyd. They didn't let that act go through. They didn't pass that act, and here we are again discussing Tyre Nichols. Non-action equates to tragedy. Non-action equates to death. Non-action equates to the blood on the hands of these legislators who are unwilling to act. While the cameras are on and it's a hot story, they talk, they give us sympathy. But when the cameras are off and we're 6 months down the road, we still have no action. We seek action, we seek it now, and we can't let it go this time. We can't do what we did and not allow these bills to go through. We have to fight for this legislation. We have to make sure that we are not here a year later talking about another tragedy as we've seen in this case of Tyre Nichols.
Van Turner Jr., thank you so much.
Thank you.